Hey there, my name is Tyler. I'm excited to show you the steps that I took to make my Live Edge desktop that is also an epoxy pour. I'll be working on two separate pieces. So as you see, look through the video, you'll see two different pieces that I'm working on. I'll try to narrate it throughout to show you my steps. But this was the most complicated woodworking project that I have ever taken on. So I thought I would videotape it and share it with all of you. Enjoy. You know it's going to be a fun woodworking project when you have to build something to build something. So this is a router sled. So I'll show you how that works. Just a piece of MDF. And then put a little platform for your router. Hooks on just like this. Fits in there nice and snug. You take your router and you go out like this. And then slide and keep going. So the whole point of the router sled is that the fence on the side is level. So when I put the sled on top and run the router through it, everything that I route below it will also be level. And I picked up one of these. I think it's about 1.25 inches, so I should be able to make quick work of it. These red oak slabs were chainsaw milled probably over 2 years ago now. And polyurethane the ends. You put spacers in between them and then strap them down with tie downs, just like you see here, so that when they dry from the middle, and then the straps will prevent them from warping. So I'm gonna unstrap them and see how they look. All right, guys, so the slab is down from the wood stack. Did a little online research because I was a little confused as to how to do this. I wanted to make a straight cut up on each side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this edge over here. I'm going to cut it straight in the middle and then clean up this edge on this side, if you guys can see that line. Now, how do you make sure you find a straight line? Well, you find the middle of each side, even though the middle is different measurements, and snap a chalk line. And then you run your combination square along the chalk line, which is your straight angle, and then you can make your straight line. So I'm gonna make those cuts, and then it'll be ready for the router sled. All right, guys, moment of truth. So half of it is on the router sled. So snow's about to come down here in Pittsburgh, so let's give this a try. See if we can make our first pass. All right, so after 2 passes, since the router sled was above the piece of wood, I could ensure that this plane is now flat. But as you can see, on this side over here on the right, it's a lot higher than the side on the left. But now when I flip this around, since it doesn't rest on the piece of wood itself, it rests on the router sled, then the other side can be leveled out. But after 2 passes, everything's looking good. This side was not cut because the other sides were a lot higher. So what I'll probably do is drop the router down just a little bit and do another pass. All right, after about 4 passes on the router sled and a heavy sand with 40 grit, we have one side completely done. Time to move on to the second piece. All right, so after the first and second pass, you can now see where some of the high and low spots are. So you can definitely tell that on this right side, it's a low spot. And if you look at the top, you can see what the router sled hit and what it didn't. So these spots that didn't get hit with the router, there's a little bit of a low spot back there. I'm gonna keep going on this side, keep planing it down until I hit all spots, and then the plane from the side will be level. So then when I flip it over, I'll be able to cut the top part, or the part that's currently laying downwards, and it'll be level as well. So the big thing here is to make sure that you're continuously making passes. But in this case, my router is as deep as it goes setting wise. So I'm actually going to raise my piece up. So if you can see, I have some a 1x down below. Then I have a piece of Lewin and a piece of pegboard to prop it up. And I'll just keep propping it up little by little until I can cut that whole piece down. Alright guys, so I wanted to show you this. If you notice, in the middle of this piece, there is a bit of a dome there. It's called cupping. The middle is actually higher than the edges. So if I would have flipped this piece over and started with it face down, what would have happened was when I hit it with the router, it would have rocked every time I hit the edges. So by doing it the other way, I can plane down the middle, and then by the time I flip it over, it'll be a flat piece on top. Alright, so section has been planed. We are now working on the flush cut on the back. So found the middle of both sides, snapped the chalk line, and then tried to figure how far over could I cut the farthest point so that I can make a flat edge on the back so that I'll be able to push it up against the wall. So I found that to be about 11 inches, so I made 11-inch marks and then snapped the chalk line there. And then the depth from my saw blade to the end of the circular saw is about 1.5 inches. So I have that little guide fence there in hopes that I can cut a straight line. We're gonna see about that though. Alright guys, next step is the bow ties. So I really wanted it to contrast with the red oak, so I found some purple heart. I don't have the templates for what the bow ties look like, so I made my own. This template here, the degrees from the top point to the end is supposed to be 15 degrees per the interweb. So each line shows 1 inch, 1.5 inches, and 2 inches in length because I wasn't quite sure how long I wanted to make it. So got them all measured out and cut and made some bow ties. So next step from here, I'm going to trace them where they're sitting and then use a router at the same depth that the bow ties are and sink them in. Clean it up with a chisel, then I'll be able to sand it down and it'll be ready for the clear coat of epoxy. So from here, I chiseled out where the bow ties will sit. Unfortunately, this one is a little bit wide, a little bit wider than I wanted it to be. But I labeled these. This is number 3, and this is the 3rd spot over. So I'll just make sure we have significant glue here. Finger, drag it up the side a little bit. Because really, it should be tight enough that the glue is really just insurance. I mean, as long as it touches a little bit, we should be okay. But because this one is a little wider than I wanted it to be, I am going to not only glue it up pretty extensively, but also going to fill it with some sawdust. So this is a little trick I saw online. If you cover the surroundings with sawdust, it fills the gap a little bit tighter. As you can see, that kind of slid in there really easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push some sawdust around this before I tap it in, so that when I tap it in, it will be a lot tighter than it would have been before. I'll keep going. I have some sawdust around here. There is no shortage of sawdust, that's for sure. Put it around here. And then just to make sure it goes down flat. Tap that over. Right. Yeah, not perfect, but filled the gap a little bit. Keep filling it in with sawdust next to it. And we'll do the next one. I have a lot of footage of this step working with epoxy that I actually deleted because I made a lot of mistakes. This was my very first time working with epoxy, and I don't really want you to learn from me. So a big thing that I should have done first was seal the wood, do a seal coat, because I kept getting bubbles popping up. And if I would have sealed the wood properly before doing my first coat, I would have had a lot less bubbles. Second challenge here was the temperature. I was doing this in the middle of winter in Pittsburgh, and if it's too hot in the room, then the epoxy won't dry very fast or at all, and if it's too cold, it'll dry too fast. So I had space heaters going in my basement on plastic cloths, and it was a real challenge. So skip past a lot of this, but I ended up doing 3 coats of epoxy, and it turned out pretty good. Alright, so 3 coats of epoxy went pretty well, but then I got to the end, and there were still bubbles. I mean, regardless of what I did, there were still bubbles. So, learn for next time. Definitely seal coat the wood before you start. So what I did was actually just dripped some epoxy on. You see how it's kind of bubbly right there? I just kind of dripped some on that side just to cover off on the parts that I sanded. So now what we're going to do, I found this product. It's a polisher. So I'm going to sand it through the grits here. 320, 600, 1000, 120, 1500, and 2000. This product, after I buff it, it will take out scratches beyond 1500 grit. 1500 grit sandpaper. So that's how I'm going to finish this, because I kept pouring epoxy, and it wouldn't work. So I'm going to go with this method, see if I can get it finished. I present to you the finished product, all from a tree that fell in my backyard. I placed one on rising legs and one on some filing cabinets for our downstairs. One's my office desk and the other keeps some household items. So I had a lot of fun doing this project. Really appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.